Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Gary Talks. Growing up, I was a massive comic book fan, and my favorite character was always Spider-Man. I mean, sure, there would be times when maybe Wolverine or Batman or Superman would become a favorite, but I'd always go back to Spider-Man. We had all sorts of Spider-Man TV programs back in the day. We had the Spider-Man TV show, we had Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, even the 1990s Spider-Man cartoon. But what we really wanted was a Spider-Man feature film. There had been talks that James Cameron was going to make one. We were super excited for that, but then it fell through. Finally, though, we did get that first Spider-Man movie directed by Sam Raimi, and that kicked off a franchise that is still going today. So in today's episode, I'm going to rank all 10 Spider-Man movies. And I have some very special guests from Marvel Studios, the head of streaming, television, and animation, Brad Winderbaum, and the voice of Spider-Man himself in your Friendly Neighborhood Spiderman, Hudson Thames. But first, let's kick this off with my least favorite Spider-Man movie, Amazing Spider-Man 2. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 stumbles under the weight of too many subplots. I actually liked Andrew Garfield better in this than his first time as Spider-Man, but the movie just crams in too many villains. Electro, Green Goblin, Rhino. It all results in an overstuffed narrative that weakens the impact of each villain. The climax is still pretty amazing, as I wasn't sure they'd have the guts to do it, and they did. I actually like this movie much better than I did thanks to Spider-Man No Way Home, and at this point, I'm actually hoping we get to see Andrew Garfield as Spidey again. But as a movie, this just missed the mark for me. Next up at number 9, Spider-Man Far From Home. While I love Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man, Far From Home is my least favorite of his films so far. The movie was saddled with filling in the post-Endgame world with everyone returning from the blip as well as the loss of Tony Stark. But then it also tries to balance teen comedy and superhero spectacle, and it ends up feeling totally uneven. The high school road trip plot feels forced, and the humor often undercuts the stakes, making it difficult to take the film seriously. Tom Holland is charming as Peter Parker, but his reliance on Tony Stark's legacy weakens Spider-Man's independence. It makes him feel more like Iron Man Jr. than his own hero. Mysterio starts off promising, but quickly becomes another underdeveloped MCU villain with predictable motivations. The CGI-heavy action sequences lack weight, and while the illusion scenes are creative, they don't save the film from feeling generic. Before I get to number 8, let me tell you how I almost had a very personal relationship with this film. My wife was actually cast in it as a lab assistant. She got to go to Sony for the costume fitting. She saw the Spider-Man costume before anybody else got to see it in the real world. And then 3 days before her scene was shot, the scene was canceled. She did not get to be in the movie, which I guess is good since it comes in at number 8, Amazing Spider-Man. I swear I'm going to stop being mean to Spider-Man movies, as I really do love them, but while The Amazing Spider-Man attempts to reboot the franchise with a darker, more grounded tone, it ultimately feels unnecessary and uninspired. Andrew Garfield is a really good actor, but his Peter Parker comes off as too cool and confident, lacking that awkward charm that defines the character. The film's retread of Spider-Man's origin story feels redundant. I mean, we get it, Uncle Ben dies. We don't have to see it every time. The Lizard is a bland, forgettable villain with weak motivations, and his CGI design is unimpressive. The film struggles with pacing, dragging in its first half and rushing in the climax. While the chemistry between Garfield and Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy is a highlight, it isn't enough to elevate a movie that feels like a studio-mandated rehash rather than a fresh take. Before I continue with my top 10, take a look at my interview with the voice of Spider-Man himself in the newest Disney animated TV show, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spiderman. Here is Hudson Thames. You played Spider-Man in What If already, but now you're playing the teenage version of him. How is that different as an actor?
You know, it's funny. I think in terms of like physicality, I think, everything happens very fast for Peter. He's moving a mile a minute. And when I am doing that, everything just becomes a lot higher and a lot more exaggerated. So it's like that just kind of happens naturally. But in terms of like as an actor, I just went back and tried to remind myself what pumped me up in at that age. And Like I was really into skateboarding at that time, and I'd go and watch old skateboard videos and like things that like really put me back into the headspace of like being that stoked on life like Peter is.
So, in your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Peter is just now learning how to use his powers. Does something like that factor into your voice work?
I think the dichotomy of Peter being in high school and navigating the superpowers results in this kind of like franticness. I think he's trying to manage two worlds all the time, crumbling, and it like really informs his behavior, like in terms of like how scatterbrained he is and like always running late, and you know.
Finally, what makes this Spider-Man show different from all the rest?
I think a very fresh and modern take on Spider-Man. It's this is the most recent Spider-Man we're seeing. It's 2025. And I think the other thing that it was cool for me as a Spider-Man fan was a lot of cool Easter eggs and callbacks to stuff we've seen, as well as a lot of like new, fresh, fun villains and stuff.
Going from the animated Spider-Man TV show to the first of the animated Spider-Man movies to make my top 10, number 7, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I really wanted to love Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and it is visually stunning, but that's where most of its strengths end. The animation is undeniably ambitious, but at times it feels excessive, overwhelming the narrative instead of enhancing it. The story, while full of potential, gets bogged down by its convoluted multiverse mechanics, making it feel more like a setup for a third film than a fully realized sequel. Pacing is another problem. There's a lot of jumping between universes, but it often feels like spectacle over substance. The emotional core that made Into the Spider-Verse so special takes a backseat to constant exposition dumps and overstuffed action sequences. And then there's the ending. Rather than delivering a satisfying resolution, it cuts off abruptly with an uninspired cliffhanger, making the film feel incomplete rather than impactful. While Across the Spider-Verse is an artistic achievement, it lacks the tight storytelling and heart of its predecessor, making it feel more like an exhausting detour than an essential Spider-Man adventure. As you'll see later in the countdown, I really loved Spider-Man 2, so I couldn't wait for Spider-Man 3 to come out, and when I found out that Venom was going to be in it, I knew this movie was going to be awesome. But of course, like all of us, I was disappointed, and it comes in very middle of the pack, Spider-Man 3. I used to think that there would never be a Spider-Man movie I'd like less than Spider-Man 3, but here we are with it coming in at number 6 on my list. The movie is a bloated, chaotic mess that drowns in its own ambition. Instead of focusing on a single compelling villain, it crams in 3, Sandman, Venom, and Harry Osborn as, I don't know, the son of Green Goblin, leaving none of them properly developed. The infamous emo Peter dance sequence, meant to show Peter's descent into arrogance, is laughable rather than dramatic. The romance between Peter and Mary Jane is exhausting, filled with unnecessary drama and forced tension. But the biggest slap in the face is that it completely wastes the black suit Spider-Man in Venom. It's one of my all-time favorite stories, and at this point, I don't know if we'll ever get to see that story told the way it should be on the big screen. Number 5, Spider-Man Homecoming. Okay, I'm done being negative as I really enjoy the rest of the Spider-Man movies on the list. Spider-Man Homecoming is a fresh, fun, and grounded take on the beloved superhero. After showing up in Civil War, Tom Holland returns and perfectly embodies a young, eager Peter Parker, balancing high school struggles with his superhero duties. The film thrives on its smaller scale stakes, making Peter's journey feel personal and relatable. Michael Keaton's Vulture is a standout villain, menacing yet surprisingly sympathetic. The humor lands well, and the absence of an overdone origin story keeps the pacing tight. While it leans heavily on Iron Man's presence, sometimes overshadowing Peter, Homecoming ultimately delivers a charming and energetic Spidey adventure that really captures the heart of the character. Next up at number 4, the one that started it all, the original Spider-Man. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is an absolute classic that perfectly captures the heart, struggle, and heroism of Peter Parker. Tobey Maguire shines as the awkward yet lovable Peter, and we completely buy his transformation into the web-slinging superhero. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is both menacing and tragic, making for an unforgettable villain. The movie blends action, emotion, and humor seamlessly like a comic book, with incredible swinging sequences that still hold up today. And let's not forget one of the most iconic moments in superhero cinema. At its core, Spider-Man is about responsibility, sacrifice, and the choices that define us. It's a thrilling, heartfelt, and timeless film that truly set the stage for modern superhero movies. Before we get to my top 3, returning to Gary Talks is the head of streaming, television, and animation at Marvel Studios, Brad Winderbaum. So first off, tell me how your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man came about.
Well, the origin of this project really dates back to around 2020-ish, 2021, when we had the opportunity to start making animation for Disney Plus. And being able to tell a Spider-Man story was something that we thought could be interesting. But it wasn't until we heard Jeff Trammell's take on it that we realized there was like a really special, unique take on Spider-Man, which is saying a lot considering how many iterations of the character there's been in animation and live action, and of course in the comics. So to find a storyteller who could bring something fresh to the character was the whole reason to do the show, and to tell stories that really were about these kids and about these characters, and kind of set them on a low simmer and make you fall in love with them, was something that only Jeff could have done.
Online, there's been quite a bit of controversy about, let's say, some of the changes to classic Amazing Spider-Man characters. So my question for you is this show actually a part of the MCU, or is it something completely different?
I think the better way to look at it is like a comic book. There's there's many different stories at play in the comics. It bounces around, it resets, there's offshoot storylines. But really, at the end of the day, you want to look at it on its own terms. Whether or not it connects to bigger things is beside the point. The If it's not, it every show, is a story in and of itself, that we make, and and should be a compelling story, whether or not it, appears in Avengers Doomsday.
Every Disney animated show seems to have its own look, and that's true with your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man too. So my question is, how does the animation style help tell the story?
Um, like the comics, it's where character will go through many different artistic iterations and over its lifespan. That's something that's very important to me as a producer, to allow the creator to create a visual style that best tells the story. So the look of the show was born out of the idea that we were both going to tell a dynamic modern story, but go back to the Steve Ditko roots of the original comic book series.
Finally, are we going to get a who's who of all of our favorite Spider-Man characters?
Yeah, the it's if you're a fan of the comics, you're going to see a lot of Spider-Man's rogues gallery appear, but maybe in ways you don't expect. Doc Ock is there, Norman Osborn, obviously, Lonnie Lincoln's origin, um, uh, but there's also other characters from different books. Nico Minoru plays a big part in this. Daredevil shows up, Doctor Strange, Iron Man. There's and others, and it has that Silver Age feeling of Spider-Man having adventures in the Marvel universe. He's having his own story, but the Marvel universe and all the intricacies of that loom large around him.
And now for my top 3. Coming in at number 3, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Not just a great Spider-Man movie, but Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of the best animated films ever made. With a bold, comic book-inspired animation style that bursts with energy, the film brings Miles Morales' journey to life in a way that feels fresh and exciting. The film's multiverse concept introduces a diverse and lovable cast of Spider-Man heroes, from the wise and weary Peter B. Parker to the effortlessly cool Spider-Gwen. And let's not forget Spider-Ham. I had almost all of his comic books, which were perfectly pun-filled, and I never thought I'd ever see him, well, anywhere. With heart, humor, and mind-blowing visuals, Into the Spider-Verse is a masterpiece that redefines what an animated superhero film can be. In the past, I've made a couple episodes talking about my favorite sequels of all time, and this movie always makes the top 10. But when it comes to Spider-Man movies, it comes in at number 2, Spider-Man 2. Sam Raimi takes everything that worked in the first film and elevates it. Tobey Maguire is back and phenomenal again as Peter Parker, torn between his duty as Spider-Man and his own happiness. His struggles feel real, making his journey all the more powerful. It's one of the things that always made me love Spider-Man. He was always relatable. Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is a tragic, layered villain, and the visual effects that bring his mechanical arms to life are stunning. And we get a little bit of classic Sam Raimi horror. It was almost like watching Evil Dead for a second. The train fight is pure cinematic perfection. It's intense, but still packed with heart. And at the core of it all, the film's message is being a hero means sacrifice, but it's those sacrifices that define true greatness. And now my favorite Spider-Man movie. This basically combines everything we love about all 10 Spider-Man movies. Well, maybe not the animated ones, but it's one movie with 3 Spider-Men. Spider-Man: No Way Home. It's the ultimate love letter to the character's cinematic legacy, blending nostalgia, heart, and high-stakes storytelling into a truly unforgettable experience. First, it delivers an emotional and transformative journey for Tom Holland's Peter Parker. No longer just a fun-loving teen, Peter faces devastating loss and learns the hard truth about responsibility, solidifying his evolution into the definitive Spider-Man. Then there's the multiversal magic, so far the only time it's really been done perfectly, as we get Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man back in a way that's both thrilling and deeply meaningful. The villains? Phenomenal. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is even more terrifying than before, stealing every scene with chilling intensity. Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, and hell, even Jamie Foxx's Electro get standout moments, making the Rogues Gallery feel just as crucial as the heroes. The final battle is electrifying, but it's the quieter moments, the heartfelt conversations, the tragic losses, and the triumphant team-up that makes No Way Home truly special. It's an emotional roller coaster that celebrates everything great about Spider-Man, and reminded me why he is my all-time favorite superhero. And that's all the time we have for this week. Be sure and join me next week when I do a special music-based episode, and I look at my top 10 favorite albums from the 1990s. See you then.
From caves to tapes, Gary's on the case. He's breaking down each scene, every place. On Gary Talks, he's quick with his peculiar wits. From plot twists to the comic strips, Gary's